Hey guys, it's Amber from NotableInk.com. Today I'm going to show you how to Copic color some Italian tiles and beautiful pears from Colorado Craft Company. I will link yesterday's pineapple up above in the right hand corner. Okay, here are the Italian tiles. This is the large version from Colorado Craft Company. They also have a small version as well. And I have a piece of Curious Metallic Virtual Pearl 5x7 cardstock here. This cardstock has a beautiful sheen to it. It almost has a color change effect. Like when you turn it to the side, you get a little bit of an iridescent blue color to it. And I thought that would be pretty for the tiles. So I have this loaded in my original size Misty. I'm going to ink it up with the Wow Embossing ink pad, and I'm going to stamp this twice. I have pre-treated the paper with an anti-static powder tool, and here I have the Wow Aztec Glintz embossing powder. I wanted to create some Tuscan tiles almost with that terracotta look and feel, and I thought Aztec Glintz would be a good way to start that off. I was so inspired by Sandy Allnock's tiles that she did for the release of these stamps, and I wanted to do something similar, but obviously not the same. So I preheated my Wow dual speed heat tool. I have it on the highest setting. I started heating it from the back just to warm up the paper, and then I came around to the front to finish melting the embossing powder. So gorgeous. I love the sheen of the embossing powder with the sheen of the metallic paper. So to start coloring, I'm going to start with the grout, and I'm using a W3, which is a warm gray, and kind of just doing a little bit of a sketchy line. The color of this grout is going to change several times. I can't quite get the color to my liking, so I use several different colors to get to the final version. Here's an E43, so I knew I wanted to go a little more beige. And so I'm starting to try and change that color here. Here I have an E01, and I wanted to lighten up the edges of the tiles to get that kind of curved, domed appearance to the edges. Then I decided I really liked that color, so I changed the tile to that color and just swiped over the tiles completely. Now, of course, this panel is embossed, so you need to use caution. Copic coloring over embossed images can ruin your nibs, so do that at your own risk. I haven't had issues with it, but it can break down the embossing powder and it can gum up your nibs, so just be aware of that. Here I have an E15, and I'm just kind of adding a little bit more of a reddish brown color to the grout here. And I'm trying to do it with a little bit of a wavy texture, because I imagine that these tiles wouldn't have a completely manufactured appearance. They would be handmade tiles, and the edges would be kind of wavy and not straight. Coming in with the E47 just to reinforce that wavy edge there. With an E13, I'm starting to add a little more depth to the edge of the tiles. Again, to get a little more shape to those edges. And then I'll come with the E01 and just blend that out. And then here's where we ended up with the Copic coloring. Now I did want to add a little more highlight to the edges of those tiles. I couldn't really do that with a lighter Copic marker, so I grabbed a white charcoal pencil. This one is from Generals. It's a Generals white charcoal. And then I have a tortillon, and I'm just going to blend out that white charcoal, and this is going to highlight the edges of the tile. And then finally I will come back in with the E41 because I got a little bit of that white charcoal on the grout, and I'm just going to darken up those edges just a bit so that they pop a little bit more. And now here are the finished tiles. I will set this aside for now to color up the pears, and then we'll come back to this. For the pears, I am going to stamp these on Curious Metallic Cryogen white paper, and I'll stamp them in Altenew Frayed leaf ink. So anytime I want to do a no-line coloring effect, I usually just stamp it in a coordinating colored dye ink. That seems to work really well for me versus like more of a neutral ink. I usually just try and pick a color that's just going to blend right into the image. So that's stamped really nicely, and I'm going to start coloring the pears. So this is E31, and you can see that I have an inspiration photo over there on the left. Unfortunately, because it's such a late image, you can't really see it in the camera, and I didn't realize that as I was filming, so it's not as helpful to you guys as it is to me. As I'm using each color on the pear, and there's quite a few colors, I'll list them up on the screen so that you can see them. And basically, I'm just trying to color match to what I see in my inspiration photo. So it looked like there were some dark browns and then more of some reddish browns to those seeds. So that's how I choose my colors. I just look at a photograph and try and match those colors as best as I can. Of course, it's not going to be exactly the same, but I do the best that I can. So for the center, I went a little bit darker here, and then for the flesh of the pear, I start with an E50, which is a super light color, and then I come in over top of that with a Y00, also really light, but it's going to add just a little bit of a yellow tinge to the flesh because it's a very white flesh, the inside of a pear, but it's not totally white. There is just a touch of yellow to it. So I thought this made it look just a little bit more interesting, a little bit more realistic. I needed to lighten the center of my pear a little bit, so I just came in with a colorless blender and swiped over that to lighten it up. For the base color of the outside of the pear, I'm using a YG03. This is my most used green marker. I just love a really bright yellow-green base to any of the greens that I'm going to be creating. I think it adds such a pretty tone underneath. So I'm going to leave a highlight in the center there, and then I'm going to start adding texture to this pear. So I'm only going to show you the coloring of this one pear because otherwise, you guys, we would be here forever, but you can translate the skin of this pear to the other pear. So with the YG63, I'm going to start dotting in some shadows. So wherever you want your deepest shadow, you're going to have the highest concentration of dots. And then as you're starting to move towards your highlight, you're going to space out your dots. Your dots are not going to be as close together, and there's not going to be as many of them. And I do this in several different layers and several different colors to add a lot of dimension and depth to this area. As I'm adding more color to this, I want to thank Amy and Adrian from Colorado Craft Company for inviting me to guest design, both today and yesterday with the pineapple, and then also on the Catherine Pooler and 3C Hop. I've had so much fun with these stamps, and I love large stamps. Whether they're flowers, I've certainly enjoyed the fruit. I think large stamps or blowing up digital stamps gives you such a huge opportunity to play with your colors. Whether that's Copic markers or watercolors or any type of color medium you're using, you have more room to play, which is something that I really enjoy. If you are interested in purchasing any of these products, I have a discount code down below. It's Amber10, the number 10. So more information on that down below. So we're getting to a stopping point or a pause point with the pear skin. I'm going to add a little bit more definition to the flesh because the flesh is now starting to look a little bit flat now that I have all of that definition and dimension on the skin. So believe it or not, I added a little more Y00 and I'm using my E50 as a shadow, which I would never thought I would say that, using an E50 as a shadow, but it is lighter than the Y00. It's just a little bit of a different shade to where it can add a nice undertone to add some shadow and dimension to the flesh of this pear. So I'm going to do that up above, a little bit down below, and then I will color the other pear off screen. And then I will find that I need to touch up the skin of this pear a little bit later on because the two pears won't look the same because I colored them at different times. For the stem, I'm going to use E99, E47, and E13. And I'm just kind of, adding flicks of it here and there. I do want to leave a little bit of a highlight both down there where the stem kind of bunches up a little bit and then up at the top as well. And then I'll take those browns down into the skin of the pear to add some greater depth there. If you're having trouble blending your Copic markers, two things you might want to look at is whether or not your markers are too dry. I didn't realize my markers were dry and I was struggling so much at blending. I finally got some refills and juiced them back up, and it was amazing how much easier it was to blend. The other thing that I recommend is coloring on a glass mat. So I have a Caterpillar glass mat underneath here, and the ink seems to stay wet a little bit longer, which allows me more blend time. When I first started coloring, I didn't like the glass mat because I felt like I tended to get more bleeding, but I love it now. So I went ahead and used the coordinating dies to die cut my pears, and then realized I didn't love the white line around it, but I wanted the nice edge of the die cut versus fussy cutting. Well, I didn't realize, so I went ahead and used one of the brown markers to color the die cut edge, not realizing that I'm going to overlap them, and I needed one of those to be green, not brown. So I ended up fussy cutting it anyway, and then using the green Copic marker to go around the edge of just that one area that I fussy cut. But I don't know, for some reason I really do like that brown edge around the die cut edge. So here's where I realized the texture of my cut pear is not the same as my whole pear, and so I'm using some of the same colors. That was the Y00. I'm going to come in with the YG03 and color over all of that texture that I added, and that's going to help blend those dots together. It's going to kind of knock back those individual dots and make them a little mushy so that they're not so distinct. That's going to help match the whole pear that's above, because you can see that I did that quite a bit. Now the reason my pear above looks like that is because I really lost my highlights on that whole pear above, and I needed to use the Y00 and the colorless blender to kind of scrub over those two highlight areas to get that highlight back. And again, to color that pear above, I just looked at my reference photo to see where the highlight should be and where the shadow should be. So that is super helpful. I highly recommend a reference photo. So here we have the two pears here, and then I will go ahead and pop up these on some foam tape. So I die cut the tiles with a Honeybee Stamps deckled edge die with a deckled edge rectangle die. Popped that up on some sticky back fun foam, and I popped up the pears as well. For the sentiment, I stamped it in two colors, Altenew Dark Chocolate and Grape Agate, because I wanted to match the color of the grout, and I didn't have an ink that color. So I just found two that I could mix together, just like I did with the pineapple from yesterday, to get the color that I needed. And then I die cut that with the coordinating die and popped that up. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed coloring the pineapple and the pears. I have to say that the pears really stretched my Copic skills. I felt like I needed to try new things, learn new skills, and I'm better for it. So I hope you guys enjoyed these projects and will give them a try. Again, check out that discount code down below, as well as a list of supplies. I really appreciate you guys stopping by. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, liking, and ringing that bell so you don't miss any new inspiration. Here's a couple more videos for you before you leave, and I'll see you real soon.